Today, chess kids, we're going to the gym. We're going to pump some iron. That's right. We are going to lift some weights, doing some computer workouts. That is a section of our site where you have a winning position and you've got to beat the #1 bot of all time. But you have the winning position, so you should be able to. Here, we're going to start with the king and the queen checkmate. Then we're going to move on to something a little bit harder. And then we're going to do a really fun one to end the video. You're going to like it. Okay, now, for the king and the queen checkmate, you want to first use the queen over and over until you get the king to the corner or the edge of the board. And the magical first move is always going to be to move your queen exactly a knight's jump away from the king. So, for example, if my queen moves here, that's not a knight's jump because a knight does not go 1, 2, 3 and then make a turn. So, on our first move, let's move our queen here to d3 because our queen would be exactly 1, 2, turn away, a knight's jump. Or you can say a knight's leap, whatever your favorite verb is. Now, I know it's really tempting to give a check to the king, just like it's tempting to only work on your biceps. Well, that's a little bit of a different story, but you want to not check the king because you're basically wanting to build a fence around the king. So queen to d3, let's see where the computer goes. The computer has moved the king up the board, and now we play a fun game of Simon Says. The king move up the board, so the queen moves up the board. I didn't say Simon Says. Well, okay, we're not actually playing Simon Says. We're playing chess, but you want to follow the king wherever he goes. So I'm going to drop the queen here. The fence is getting a little smaller. Let's see where the king goes next. The king moves diagonally to the right and up. So our queen should move diagonally to the right and up. Now, quick question, chess kids. Have we given check to the king yet? No, we have not. We've kept our queen exactly a knight's jump away. It's a little bit like a cat toying with a ball of yarn. You know, we're just kind of toying with this king here. We're not actually trying to go after it right away. So our queen moves to e5. And now the computer's thinking, not really sure what the computer was thinking about, but the king again moved diagonally up to the right. So we're again going to move diagonally up to the right. Now we do want to get a little bit careful as the king approaches the corner that we do not accidentally put the king in stalemate. That would be the one danger. We're actually about to get to that in 1 second, so hold on for that danger. Okay, queen f6. Now the king only had one move. The king had to go diagonally down the board to the right. So our queen's going to move diagonally down the board to the right. You may not think we're getting anywhere, but I promise you we are. Now, when our queen moves to g5, I'm going to hover her there for a second. I'll bet you the computer's going to think for a second, even though there's actually only one legal move. Our computer's a little bit silly, okay? But when the king touches the corner, that's when Fun Master Mike's bells and whistles and maybe even fireworks should go off in your head because that's the one danger on the chessboard. I'm going to drop my queen here. The computer did think for half a second, and here's the danger. If I move my queen up the board, I'm going to be very careful not to let go of my mouse. I'm going to keep my finger on the button because if I were to drop her on that square, continuing our Simon Says game, then the king would not be in check, but he would have nowhere safe to move. This would be stalemate. The game ends in a tie, and that would be a tragedy for white. We're trying to win the game. We're not trying to make a tie. So the minute the enemy king touches the corner, stop. Fireworks, bells and whistles, whatever you want to call it. This is the time to move your own king in the game. Our king is going to assist our queen in the checkmate. Notice if our queen had moved up the board 2 squares, that would be checkmate if the queen had a helper. The king right now can capture the queen. So our king's job, the white king's job, is to move up the board and guard that g7 square. That way the king can be a nice helper for his queen and they can all live happily together in their castle. Okay, so I'm gonna put the queen back. I'm gonna drop her very carefully. I'm not gonna move the queen. I'm gonna move my king and any path up the board is fine. And look at the poor black king. He has to go back and forth. Back and forth. He has no other options. Here comes our king. Dun, da, da. Charge. The king is going to move to f6. I'm really not sure why the computer is thinking every move. The computer is probably coming to terms with, being very bored in life. Now our king finally touches the g7 square. I actually can't draw arrows on computer workouts, but I can at least pick up the king and show you that this king touches that square. This king, that square, this king, that square. Now, of course, you can't move your king there because, kings can't touch. We have the classic sticky breath. And by the way, king, you need to go see a dentist. But let's put the king back on f6. Now our king is close enough to assist his queen. The queen moves up to the square g7, and that should be checkmate. The black king cannot capture. because the kings would be touching. So I'm going to release the queen, and there we go. And by the way, I did that checkmate in 11 moves. I want you to practice this a bunch on the ChessKid computer workouts, and I want to give you a special challenge. It can actually be done faster than 11 moves. It's a little bit tricky, but it's actually not dissimilar to my advice of moving the queen and knight's jump away. So I'm going to let you figure that out on your own, but if you can at least do the checkmate in anything around, 20 moves or less, that's good enough for me. So there you go. That's the king and queen checkmate in computer workouts. Now, let's move on to something a little bit harder, which is the king and rook checkmate. All right, we're moving on. This one's a little bit harder, but you know what? There are some similarities. Of course, the rook can't move diagonal. We know that. We've also made it a little bit tricky in ChessKid land by putting the white king and the white rook on different sides of the board. So here's the main difference. The rook cannot guard itself. You can actually see in our starting position, the rook is a knight's jump away. The problem is, if it was black's move, black's king could move up the board 1 square to g5, and our rook is not able to stay there because he's about to be captured. So the rook's inability to move diagonal means he needs a little bit of help. And of course, if the rook runs away, then the fence could be getting bigger. So to make a really, really long story really short, your king and rook need to stay together. So in our first move, let's move our rook somewhere close to our king. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and put him here. I know that our king and our rook are not yet touching, but we're going to fix that in the next couple of moves, okay? So our rook moves here, and notice the black king is inside a fence. Our rook would be aiming at all these squares, and all of these squares, sorry, those aren't exactly straight lines, but you get the point. So we're going to drive that black king to the corner H1. Let's go ahead and put a big target on H1. Boom! Thank you, Mr. Producer. We are going to get that king to go to the target square of H1. Don't believe me? What? Well, no, just keep watching. Okay, so I'm going to drop the rook there. Now, the black king is not exactly coming close to our rook, which is what I would have done, but I'm going to go ahead and connect our king and our rook just for educational purposes. Okay, our king and our rook are now officially connected, and the black king is still inside of our fence or our box, or, choose your own metaphor. Okay, so here's going to be the process once your king and your rook are connected. Every single move, I want you to try to make the fence smaller with your rook. And if you can't, then you improve your king. It's just that simple, chess kids. Try to make the fence smaller. If you can't, move the king. So in this first position, we actually can make the fence smaller. We can move the rook 1 square down the board, and now the black king cannot go above the 5th rank. So again, that's not a check. Remember the king and queen mate? We basically never gave check until the very end. Don't be tempted to give check. If you give check right here, then the king will move to D3 and he will be outside of our fence. Now you might say, but from Master Mike, now we can drive the king to A1. Well, now you're trying to be like a chess master. You're switching boxes, and we don't really need to be doing that. Okay, so eventually, you can switch boxes if you know how to make the box really small, but there's no real need to. In fact, I'm not even sure that's a better move. Okay, so rook to D5, that's going to be our opening move. Let's see where the computer goes. Okay, the computer moved the king down. We go back to our process. Remember? Make the fence smaller if you can. If you can't, move your king. Here, you can make the fence smaller. Remember, never check. Okay, this is not about checking. I know check is tempting. I know that the word checkmate, more than half of the word is the word check, right? Checkmate, I think, is 9 letters. Check is 5 of those 9. That's more than half, but you can take away learning language. Okay, we're learning chess here. So in this position, don't be tempted by check. Instead, let's make the fence a little bit smaller. And notice our king guards the rook. Our king and rook are going to be touching almost the entire time. Okay, now black's king is going to move. All right, black's king has moved. And now we need to go back to our process, make the box smaller, or the fence, whatever you want to call it. But here, if we go down the board, uh-oh, what's going to happen? Yeah, uh-oh, and SpaghettiOs. The king will take our rook for dinner, and then it'll be a draw. King versus king, nobody can win. Of course, that moves a check. Then the king will step to the left. He'll be outside of our fence. So this is our first time where we cannot make the fence smaller. We need to move our king. And as far as where to move the king is actually a little bit closer to the black king here than here. So I'd move the king a little bit closer. I'd move the king to this square. Okay, now black's king is going to move, and he chose E3. Okay, back to our process. Can we make the fence smaller? I would argue no. If we play rook there, well, first of all, that's a check, so you know that's wrong. Also, you're probably throwing tomatoes at your screen because I have just hung the rook. The black king can capture. Lucky for me, though, I have not let go of my mouse. So, let's put the rook back. We could, of course, go here, but then the king would step up the board, and he would be outside of our fence. And, of course, that moves a check as well. So, it's got to be a king move. There is no way to make the fence smaller, okay? The king could move here, but again, it's actually a little bit further away than this move. This move is okay, but I would go down to the square c3. We're a little bit closer to the black king. King moves, and guess what? We can make the fence smaller. Now our rook has patiently waited a couple of moves. The rook moves there, and the black king is now stuck inside a really small fence, and guess what? We can make the fence smaller still. Now, rook to d2 is definitely the move I want you to play. It totally fits our pattern. Rook to e3 is a grandmaster move. First of all, it's a check. Secondly, it lets the king get out of the fence by going left. But if anybody out there watching my video is rated 2000 or above, you might know that rook e3 actually is okay, but we're not going to get into that today. No, maybe for my next video, maybe for ChessKid YouTube channel 2.0, we'll do that. But for right now, let's just play rook to d2. It follows our pattern, and it actually makes life really easy because look at that. The bot only had one square to move to. We're getting really close to that target square h1. Mr. Producer, throw a big target back on h1. Boom! There we go. X marks the spot. No, bullseye marks the spot. I don't know what graphic my producer has chosen, but it's a good one, and it's on h1, okay? Now, we can't make the box smaller. If we play rook e2, our rook's going to get captured. If we give a check, the king will move up the board. That's not going to work. So, now is the time to improve our king. King c2 is a little bit shy, okay? We can bring our king a little bit closer. King to d3 is as close as we can get. All right, the computer moved the king back. Now, we don't want to move our rook because it's going to be a check if we do. So let's move our king again. Okay, now we can make the box smaller with the rook. There we go. We just did that. King's going to move. We're going to make the box smaller again, or the fence, whatever you want to call it. King moves. If we play rook to g2, we will lose our rook. That's not going to work. We play rook to f1, that's a check. Then the king will get out of the fence. So instead, let's move our king to f3, and then the black king has moved sideways. Here again, if we give check, then the black king will step to the left. We don't want that. So we're going to make our king go closer again. And when the king moves to h1, which is his only move, now it's time for a checkmate. By the way, if you literally follow my advice to the bitter end, you would play rook to g2, because that technically does make the fence smaller. But just like in the king and the queen mate, there is a stalemate, stranger danger. Oh no, if we play rook to g2, then the king is not in check, but he has nowhere to move. That would be stalemate, that would be a tie, that would be sad fun master. So, when the king touches the corner, you should be careful of stalemate opportunities. You should be looking for checkmate opportunities. Now, there are two different checks with the rook. Is rook h2 mate? Or is rook f1 mate? Cast your votes now. I don't know where you're casting them. Maybe in the sky. I can read you, though. Rook f1 is the checkmate. I'm sure that's the one that you voted for. And yeah, the black king cannot travel up the board because the kings will be touching. And of course, our rook aims at all of the squares on the first rank. I do want to give you one slight extra little bit of advice before I play the checkmate. I just want to go back one move here. Actually, the computer is making me go back two moves. So I'm going to hold my king here for the moment. Sometimes you will do everything that I tell you to do, and you'll get in this position. But instead of it being black's move, it'll be white's move. And I want to tell you how to handle that. You need to play something called a waiting move. So let's just pretend in this position that it's white's move. You need to find a move that basically does nothing, forces the black king to h1, and then you play rook f1 mate on the next move. Now, a good waiting move in this position would be to slide your rook back to f3. It doesn't actually make the fence bigger because the king can't get out. I know it looks weird because your rook is actually giving ground, but you're not really giving ground. So in this position, again, if you get into it with white's move, which is totally possible even though you follow all my advice, just slide your rook back to f3. The king will go to h1, then the rook will come back to f1, and that will be a checkmate. By the way, it would not be a great move to play rook e2 here, because then the black king would step to the left, and then you actually are making the fence bigger, okay? Anyway, let's go back to our game. It's a little bit complicated, but I do feel the need for completeness to tell you that. So the king goes back to g3. the black king has to go to h1. We can finally play our checkmate, rook f1. Okay, I think that took me 13 moves. So again, the main thing is that you practice this and you get it right. Anything less than 20, 25 moves is totally fine. But if you want to beat my record, try to do it in 13 moves or less. Who knows? Maybe you can. Okay, now I promised you a fun computer workout at the end, and fun is where we're going. We got first-class tickets to Funland. Here we go. Oh my goodness, what have we done? Well, apparently in Funland, we get our entire back row army, and black only gets a king. That's pretty fun, okay? So here's the challenge. I don't think this is going to be hard to win. After all, I just taught you how to checkmate with a lone rook. And in this position, you have 2 rooks, a queen, 2 bishops, and 2 knights, so you are going to win. The challenge here that I'd love for you to try is simply to see how fast you can checkmate the black king. See if you can beat my record. I don't really have a technique for this because this would never actually happen in a real game. But, you know, sometimes we go to Funland, we see what happens. So I've never practiced this before. I'm just going to make some moves and see what happens. Let's put our rook on this square on move number 1. Okay, the king has stepped back. Now I'm going to put the queen here to stop the black king from moving forward. Now I'm going to put the rook here to stop the king from moving forward. Where's the black king going to move? He's going to move there. Now I'm going to put the queen here. Notice the funny thing is I have not actually checked the king. Very similar to the couple of checkmates I've just taught you. I'm just cutting off the king's escape. Then when the king moves, this rook can move up. And I think that was checkmate in 5. Okay, so we did it in 5, but can we do it faster? I don't know. Let's move my queen up to this square and see what happens. Okay, the king moves. Now our second move. Let's play rook check. This time I did check, by the way, of course. And now the king moves there. Okay, so we've got 2 more moves to checkmate if we want to break our record. Let's play rook check here. And when the king moves, this is move number 4. Do you see a checkmate on move number 4? I actually do. I think rook to here is checkmate. Let's take a very long look at the screen. Yeah, I think our knights and bishops on the back row provide a lot of help. I think that's checkmate. In fact, I think queen here is also checkmate. What do you guys think? That looks like checkmate. In fact, I think queen here might be checkmate. In fact, wait a minute. Is this bishop move checkmate?
Oh boy!
I think it is. I think we should be checkmating with our bishop. Boom! There we go. That was checkmate in 4 moves. So boys and girls, when you check out your ticket to Funland, see if you can checkmate in 4 moves, just like Fun Master Mike. Maybe use your own technique. And who knows, maybe there's a mysterious checkmate in 3 that I have not found. You can practice over and over. And if you get that checkmate in 3, make sure you put it on your refrigerator because you will be faster than Fun Master Mike.